Warami guys, Mudjeri Nawunya, and welcome back to Mick's 4-wheel drive touring, and welcome back to the Getting Out There series. In today's episode, as mentioned last time, we are going to be discussing picking your vehicle. What vehicle is right for you and the sort of travelling and touring that you want to do. Now, as mentioned in the last episode, guys, there's a lot to see just in your local area where you don't even need a car. Public transport, in a lot of senses, especially for those of you in big towns like Sydney, and from the western suburbs of Sydney and that, there's a lot of areas you can still access by public transport without the need of a motor vehicle whatsoever. So keep that in mind, guys. Look at the Western Sydney Zoo, the museums and that in Sydney and things like that. If you haven't already watched the last episode, guys, jump back now, check it out. The link's just above here. Alrighty, so now I'm assuming you've watched that episode and you're ready for this one. Again, today we're going to discuss picking your vehicle. What vehicle is right for you? In the last episode, we discussed what sort of places you want to go. And I briefly touched on what sort of cars are around, available, what sort of transport options are best for many of those places. But we're going to get more into that now. So picking your vehicle. First thing you want to work out is where your budget sits. Do you have the ability to buy a brand new vehicle? Do you want to buy a brand new vehicle? Do you have to get finance or do you have cash to pay for it? Are you borrowing off a friend or family member or something like that? Or do you have to try and get loans through a bank or a finance company for it? That's going to be a big deciding factor. For example, you're not going to go out and buy a 2017 Mitsubishi Pajero, or let's please the Toyota boys and go a 200 series Land Cruiser or the new 300 series. You're not going to go and buy one of them for $5,000. You know, so if that's your budget, you really need to stop and think of what your budget is and what you can get for that. If you are just visiting the main tourist attractions and locations, like mentioned with your zoos and museums and things like that, going up the coast and staying at caravan parks in a tent and whatnot, you don't need anything special. Any family car will do. After all this series is over and done with, I will be doing a short video about packing for a trip, and I will show you how you can pack up a little Toyota Corolla to suit two people for a weekend in the bush or a weekend at a caravan park. So yeah, guys, look at where your budget is. I paid $3,500 for my Pajero. Now, given COVID tax and all that at the moment, prices have gone up, and my model Pajero these days is going for around about the $10,000 mark. Considerable difference. It's COVID tax, unfortunately, but I do think now that restrictions are lifting and people can start travelling overseas again, I do think a lot of people are going to start selling their four-wheel drives. So this is a little thing I'm looking at, is I think a lot of people have gone out and bought four-wheel drives because they can't go overseas, and now that they can start going back overseas, they're going to do that and they're not going to have the need for their four-wheel drive. So I think in the next 12 months, four-wheel drive prices are going to drop. Now, when it comes to car sales, I normally recommend private sales. I'm not a fan of car yards because I know they put a huge markup on the vehicle, and I like to try and pay cash. I don't like to owe money when it comes to buying a vehicle. And that's why I've never looked at buying a brand new car, because I can't afford to buy one with cash, and I don't want to get finance if I can help it. The Pajero second-hand car does me well. And it was purchased through a private sale. So if you can do that, if you've got the cash there to do so, to go out and say, I've got $5,000, I'm going to look at my budget for $5,000 or 10 grand or 20 grand or whatever your budget might be. I'm going to go and look at that rather than going, okay, well, I've got $5,000 for a deposit and then I'm going to go and throw another 10 grand loan on top of it. Personally, I don't think that's the best option because it is putting you in debt. And if something happens and you can't pay that debt back, you get in trouble. If you are going through a car yard or an online auction, auctions at times can be really good places to buy a car. You can get a really good newish car for really cheap. Think of like ex-police cars and things like that. I know a lot of the police do use the Gen 4 Pajero, especially up here on the Central Coast. So their ex-police Pajeros, they haven't been totally flogged out. They've been reasonably well maintained and looked after. And you can pick them up really cheap. So auctions are always a good option to have a look at. If you are going through a car yard, then I don't know, car yards have a tendency to buy for really cheap when it comes to second-hand vehicles and put a huge markup on it and then try to sell you everything else to go along with it. For example, they might buy my Pajero for $1,000 as a trade-in, give me $1,000 off another car, which they've already got a markup on anyway. So they may give me $1,000 off this car to trade in my Pajero, and then they'll turn around and sell mine for $5,000, $6,000, $7,000. And then they'll try and sell you things like finance if you don't have enough money for it, and additional insurances and free servicing and all this bullshit. They'll try and offer you all this sort of stuff so that they make more money out of it. And at the end of the day, you get screwed even more. I'm not a fan of car yards. I have looked at car yards in the past for vehicles. I've never purchased through a car yard though. I've always purchased through private sales. If you do happen to go through a car yard, or even in private sales, make sure you negotiate. So everybody, when they try to sell a car, or anything in that matter, they'll put a price on it and say it might be $5,000, but they'll be happy to take $4,000. So they'll negotiate, and if they get 4.5, then they're cheering. So you get a saving, they still get more than what they were happy to take, their bottom line. So always negotiate, guys, because there's always that ability there. I didn't really negotiate with the Pajero. I asked him to throw in a alloy bull bar that was there, that he's claimed to fit my car, which turns out it doesn't. I asked him to throw that in, and yeah, that was basically it. That was the deal. I paid the $3,500 that he was asking. But again, car yards and things like that will always offer warranties and dealer services and all this sort of shit that a lot of the times you really don't need, and you end up paying more for in the long run. Next thing you need to look at when it comes to picking a car is, what are you going to use it for? Now, are you going to use it mostly as a daily driver and once every couple of months go for a little holiday up into the bush? Or are you going to be towing heavy loads? Are you going to be travelling permanently or a lot, very often? What are you going to be using that car for? See, if it's your daily driver, then you might want to reconsider possibly getting a four-wheel drive. My Pajero is my daily driver, and I will say it is a bit heavy on petrol. It is also a petrol, not a diesel, but it is a bit heavy on fuel, being that it is a 2.5 tonne vehicle. So if you're going to go looking at buying a Land Cruiser, Patrol, Pajero, Ranger, whatever it might be, and you're just running around town every day, even in a diesel variant, that can still get very expensive just for your fuel. So that's something you should be looking at. But if you're going to be towing a caravan or something like that, and you're going to need something a bit heavier and a bit more capable of towing that caravan. So you need to compromise quite considerably when it comes to picking a vehicle. Again, if you're only going to see main things, then your vehicle doesn't really matter. Station wagons are great for those that want to get out and explore the country and carry a fair bit of stuff in the back, but aren't looking to tow and do off-road sort of stuff. Station wagons are a great option. There's not a lot of them around these days though. But, you know, even the station wagon four-wheel drive, like the Pajero, Land Cruiser, Patrol, etc., they're still good for that, and they do give you that option to go wherever. So yeah guys, if it is going to be a daily, you want something that's going to be pretty comfortable too. So things like the Pajero with the independent front and rear suspension in the Gen 3 and 4s, they're more comfortable to road use. They're not, maybe not as capable on ruts and big washouts and things like that, but they're more comfortable of a drive in general than live axle vehicles. So if you are even looking at a four-wheel drive, maybe looking at a independent suspension vehicle, or at least an IFS, independent front suspension, like the Prados, could be a better option for you. So what sort of touring are you going to do? Are you going to be doing the sort of touring where, again, you need to tow a caravan? Or you're going to be going up into national parks like I am here in the Wattigans? Or, again, Barrington Tops or Lithgow and Blue Mountains areas, things like that. If you're going to be doing some of that sort of stuff, then you're going to want to start looking towards a four-wheel drive. State conservation areas, so to speak, such as Munmora State Conservation Area, which you've seen in a previous video of mine. All the campsites and everything there are paved roads all the way in. So places like that, you can access them still and stay in areas similar to this without the need of a four-wheel drive. And again, are you going to be towing? If you're going to be towing a caravan, then you probably want to look at a four-wheel drive. Most four-wheel drives have a higher towing capacity than what a normal sedan will. However, you don't necessarily need to tow that big, but it does make life a lot easier. Dual cab utes commonly have a higher towing capacity than what a station wagon style, like the Pajero, Patrol, Land Cruiser, Prado, etc. The dual cab utes normally have a higher capacity, and I'm putting those up on the sides here for you guys to have a look at. But dual cab utes do generally have a higher towing capacity. So if you are towing a caravan, especially a bigger one, maybe a dual cab ute is going to be a better option for you. Next thing you want to have a look at is what sort of fuel the vehicle uses. Again, if you're running a daily driver, then petrol in a four-wheel drive in particular is going to get quite expensive. When it comes to fuel around town, it doesn't really matter. Personally, I'd stick with petrol. I believe it's a nicer drive, it's quieter. Fuel is normally cheaper per litre when running 91 anyway, like I do. And I find maintenance and servicing is normally a bit cheaper on a petrol vehicle. Yeah, personally, I'd run petrol if you're going to be doing a lot of round town stuff. But if you do want to be travelling more remote areas like the Simpson Desert and Nullarbor and all that sort of stuff, then a diesel would be the better option, because diesel is will give you more kilometres per litre in situations like that. And diesel can also be transported easier. See, petrol will ignite from a spark, whereas diesel won't. Diesel needs to be warmed up to a certain temperature before it will ignite. So you can carry diesel on a roof rack, for example, and if you get a leak in the tanks, the diesel's not just going to straight away catch fire, whereas petrol, you know, it can quite easily catch fire. So diesel in that sort of sense, if you're going to be doing longer touring trips across country, and that diesel's probably the better option. And I think diesel's normally a bit easier to find out in the middle of the bush too, or middle of the outback. LPG is something that if you're going to stick to towns and popular locations or build up areas, LPG is fine. It is pretty cheap. It doesn't give you bad mileage. However, if you are going to be heading more remote areas, LPG will get very difficult to find. So for the most part, I'd recommend sticking with petrol or diesel. My personal preference is petrol, but again, if you are going to be travelling remote through the Kimberleys and all that sort of stuff, diesel would probably be the better option in that sense. The other thing you want to look at, and I've already touched on this briefly with your towing capacities, and we'll go through that a bit more here. Every vehicle has a GVM, and the GVM stands for gross vehicle mass. They also have a GCM, which is a gross combined mass, which means your vehicle and whatever you might be towing. They also have a towing capacity, a roof load rating, and a number of other ratings and limits that you have to abide by. In my situation, I much prefer a wagon over a ute because for me it's more practical. Reasons I like the wagons is they're more secure, normally more comfortable. Utes are more of an industrial vehicle, and I can set up my bed and everything like that in the back of it. I'm not too worried about dust and things like that. I can pull up at a shopping centre and not worry that I've got things just sitting in the back of my tray that people can nick. I do lack a little bit of storage space. I could get more into a ute tray than I can in the back of the Pajero, especially if I was to go a canopy or something like that on it. But for my uses, the wagon is more comfortable and just suits me much better. GVM is something that everybody needs to look at, and a lot of wagons don't have the same GVM as a ute. They will have a lower GVM than a ute. The GVM on the Pajero is around about 2.7 tonne. The tar weight, which is the weight of the vehicle with all its fluids and that, no cargo, no additional options, is around about 2.1. Now I've weighed my vehicle, and with everything I've added to it, I'm around about 2.4 tonne, which means I've still got about 300 kilos worth of load that I can add into the car. So once me and my wife get in there, we don't have a lot left, but you know, it's not too bad, and it's enough for me. Whereas a ute will normally have a higher GVM, and then that's something you do want to look at those. If you're putting a canopy on your ute, then quite often dual cab utes seem to have a weak point, as you can see from the photos above, where they will bend in the middle. So if you have too much weight over the back wheels, they have a tendency to bend. And we'll discuss that a little bit more in the next episode of setting up your vehicle. So wagon versus ute, it's completely up to you. But again, if you are towing, a ute's probably a better option. If you want to carry more of a load in the back or put a canopy on, things like that, then again, a ute's probably going to be a better option. Just make sure you keep an eye on your GVMs, your towing capacities, your gross combination mass, and especially if you look to go a rooftop tent, look at your roof load ratings. Not just the roof rack load rating, look at the vehicle manufacturer specified roof load rating. Pajero has a roof load rating, Gen 3 and 4, has a roof load rating of 100 kilos. Mitsubishi have informed me that you deduct 30% as soon as you go onto a dirt road. As soon as you hit unsealed roads, you deduct 30% from that 100 kilos. So then I have a 70 kilo roof load rating that has to include my roof racks, platforms, and anything else I carry on top of it. For example, rooftop tents, solar panels, tool kits, spare wheels, things like that. Alright guys, I'm going to cut it at that. Battery on this camera is about to die, so remember, these are coming out twice a week, every Wednesday, every Sunday. So make sure to subscribe, make sure to hit that bell. And I'll see you in the next episode, guys, where we will discuss setting up your vehicle. Yes, setting up your vehicle. Alright guys, take care, peace, and as always, I'll see you on the tracks. Yano!